Thank you so much, Michael and Cynthia, for that very kind and touching introduction. Before we get started, I also want to thank the AILA volunteers and AILA's national staff who worked tirelessly to put together this annual conference in this gorgeous city with this cutting-edge curriculum and the stellar experts in our field. So thank you so much. I also want to thank my parents, who you have all now had the pleasure of meeting through the PowerPoint and Michael's introduction, as he shared his work on our case. It is the courage and determination of my parents that allowed my family to seek safe haven in this country, and I'm eternally grateful to them for their perseverance in forging ahead despite all obstacles. As a young woman arriving in a new country, my parents made sacrifices for my brother and me. I watched them work hard with pride, no matter what the job was, whether it was cleaning homes or doing gardening or selling furniture and used cars. My parents taught me by example about the importance of hard work, integrity, and humility. They raised a family with unconditional love and support. My parents showed me that no matter what the job is, you do it with integrity and humility. They are my inspiration. They are my guiding light. I love you. Thank you so much. Now, after years of sacrifice and hard work, here I stand. Now, my family's story is not unlike that of any immigrants coming to America today. I am truly humbled and honored to be here today to accept the challenge to lead this organization in these unprecedented times. In times when immigrants are vilified and despised, when immigrants are labeled criminals, rapists, and job stealers, when families and children seeking refuge are locked up for indefinite periods of time or turned away at the border, only to be returning to harm or certain death. When detainees are dying in detention centers for lack of proper medical care, and when the current administration believes that they can exclude an entire class of immigrants with a simple stroke of a pen. It is not that we as immigration attorneys have not seen anti-immigrant sentiment before, but to borrow a line, this time it's personal. This time myths and untruths are spread indiscriminately, creating unfounded panic and fear. Fear turns into anger, and anger incites violence. We have seen the despair and anxiety of immigrants in our communities. We have seen the abuses of emboldened agents who feel empowered and fueled by their biases, who detain arriving foreign nationals and pressure them into giving their lawful right to enter our country. There are many examples. But this time, it's personal. Day in and day out, I see young men and women who arrive at the border fleeing the violence and danger in their home countries, including the country I come from. I see these 14, 16, and 17-year-old unaccompanied minors living in fear, despair, and feeling abandoned. We have all read the reports detailing how the Northern Triangle region of Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras is one of the most violent regions in the Western Hemisphere. We have all read the reports of boys and girls being forced to join gangs or be killed or tortured. It is personal because their stories hit home. Because I know these young men and women would not flee their home country if they did not truly fear for their lives. It is personal because I was only 15 years old when my parents made that courageous decision to flee our country. It is personal because, like you and I, these young men and women deserve an opportunity to feel safe, to have a childhood, to live free from fear and violence. It is personal because closing the doors on these unaccompanied minors is a sure death sentence for them back home, and it does not make America safe. But the attacks of this administration go beyond immigration. We are witnessing an attack on the core principles upon which this country was founded, that all men and women are created equal, that we all have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But in the current climate, that right seems to be reserved for the elite few who are aligned with the xenophobic and narrow views of the current administration. This is why we are here today. As proud immigration lawyers, we must stand united and resist the hatred. We must counter the lies. We must uphold our Constitution and reaffirm that we are all entitled to due process of law. For the past few months, as I've struggled to come to terms with this new reality, I have reflected upon why I am an immigration attorney. And I ask you, why are you an immigration attorney? What drives you to do what you do? Look around the person sitting next to you. Knowing what we have experienced in the past few months, imagine a day without your colleagues sitting next to you to your right or to your left, working side by side with you even though you practice thousands of miles away. Imagine if there had been no immigration attorneys at the airports after the executive orders went into place. Imagine if lawyers did not roll up their sleeves and file lawsuits against the unlawful executive orders, or didn't help the foreign stranded nationals, the refugees, the professionals with valid work visas, the families, and the children. Scary, right? Not the world you want to imagine, not the America we know. We are indeed fortunate that that is not the case. We are immigration lawyers, and we are here to fight fearlessly for our clients and for the integrity of our nation. Do you remember how you felt the first time you heard about family detention? About the mothers and children fleeing for their lives from Central America, being detained for months or being deported summarily at the border? And do you remember how AILA responded? And the thousands of volunteers spending 2 weeks in Artesia and then Dili? Well, we showed the previous administration that AILA lawyers can and will mobilize quickly to protect due process and uphold the law. Family detention, as horrible as it has been in fact our training ground for what we are facing today and what we will face under this administration. Our experiences in fighting family detention, in helping tens of thousands of mothers and children seek asylum from outside the walls of the detention centers, showed how tremendously powerful we are when we work together. When we look for new allies and partners with groups committed to a shared vision of America that welcomes all and still shines bright. We did not let the government railroad us on family detention during the Obama administration. And guess what? We will not let this administration railroad us today. We will stand firm against injustices, both small and large. Again, look around the room today and see this diverse group of lawyers who are part of this campaign. The people in this room represent the diversity of America. America is about understanding, tolerance, and diversity. It is what AILA also stands for. It is what we do every day of our lives, and it is what we must protect. We work together to enhance our nation's fabric, to help employers and corporations bring talent from around the world that inspires innovation and advancement. And in the process, we increased our shared prosperity and expand our freedom and democracy. This diversity strengthens our culture of tolerance, acceptance, and makes America an example for other nations. Throughout our nation's history, immigration lawyers have helped bring the best and the brightest. Scientists, innovators, artists, athletes, engineers, and doctors. Immigrants like Albert Einstein, who came to America's shores in 1933, shortly after the Nazi government assumed power. Or like Madeleine Albright, our former Secretary of State, who was born in Czechoslovakia in 1937, and then moved to the United States in 1948, fleeing the communist takeover. Or like Hamdi Ulukaya, the founder and CEO of Chobani Yogurt. Yes, that yogurt you had this morning, didn't it taste good? Yes. Now, if you didn't know, Ulu Kaya is a Turkish immigrant of Kurdish descent, and he came to the United States in 1994 to study business. Now, as an entrepreneur, he started his yogurt business in 2005. Chobani's estimated value just 2 years ago was $3 to $5 billion with a B. And his business currently employs over 2,000 individuals, including over 300 refugees in upstate New York. Now imagine that, a Turkish immigrant improving the lives of American citizens and immigrants alike. Now this is the America we all know. We also stand vigilant to protect America's promise and opportunity for justice for all. Every battle we face for our clients, whether it's an immigration court and federal court, every cancellation of removal, every asylum application, every petition, every motion and every brief we file reiterates our commitment loud and clear to remain the protectors of that promise. And now more than ever, America's promise is in jeopardy. We fight for America's promise to people like Suha Abu Shama. She's a physician in Cleveland who in January of this year was not allowed to return to the United States to resume her position as a resident doctor at the Cleveland Clinic when the travel ban closed America's doors to citizens of the 6 designated countries. Dr. Abu Shama is a Muslim and a citizen of Sudan, and she was refused entry when she was returning from a 3-week trip to the Middle East to visit her family. AILA lawyers sprang into action, and she was eventually allowed to return. We fight for America's promise to Fatima, a 4-month-old Iranian infant who was diagnosed with a heart condition and needed surgery. Doctors in Iran did not have the equipment for the procedure, so they turned to America. Oregon's Health and Science University, one of the top hospitals in the country for pediatric heart surgery. Yet she was also prevented from coming to the United States when her parents' visa appointment was abruptly canceled as a result of the executive orders. It was only through the efforts of amazing AILA members that she was able to get her surgery later and in time. Actions taken by this administration within 1 week of the 45th president taking office are indeed frightening and enraging. It called to mind dark times in our nation's history when we turned away Jewish refugees fleeing from Nazi Germany, or when we rounded up US citizens and immigrants of Japanese descent. But again, this time, AILA lawyers and partners acted immediately. We came together to challenge the travel ban and the refugee ban, and we were successful. And where are we today? Yes, that is the travel ban, Mr. President, that's what we lawyers call it too, remains suspended as a result of court action, and its fate will rest with the Supreme Court. But we shouldn't be surprised. Unfortunately, this administration keeps close quarters with individuals like Steve Bannon, the former head of the white nationalist outlet Breitbart, and Stephen Miller, who is an open nationalist and believes that multiculturalism threatens our nation, and Chris Kobach, the Kansas Secretary of State who authored Arizona's 10B70, and Jeff Sessions, the Attorney General for 2 decades in the Senate, had led an anti-immigrant crusade. Now, all of this should raise alarms as loud as a tsunami warning. And I will tell you, there is a famous quote from a Latin American writer, Miguel de Cervantes, that says, "Tell me which company you keep, and I will tell you what you are." Well, the company this administration keeps shows clearly what this administration stands for. It is clear that the 45th president campaign promises have begun to be shaped into a concrete actions to establish the deportation force. The administration quickly issued new enforcement priorities when, read closely, simply mean anyone who is in the United States without documentation is a priority for removal. Now, without clear, reasonable, concise guidelines on enforcement priorities, this administration has given Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, unfettered discretion to stop, question, and detain anyone who looks like a foreign immigrant without regard for the most basic constitutional principles. We see that the Justice Department is going after so-called sanctuary cities, but as we know, better named welcoming cities, whose mayors and law enforcement officers are trying to obey the law. You know, that little piece of document that's about 230 years old, the Constitution. Requiring a warrant from ICE for a detainer is not some outlandish demand. It is due process. It is fair. It is just. And AILA will stand with those localities who seek to protect residents from a federal government bent on turning local police into immigration agents to the detriment of our communities. As I said, it is stunning that this is happening every day in our very own backyard and not far off in a totalitarian regime where human rights and dignity are not respected. We should be incensed. We should be furious when ICE purposely goes into a courthouse and arrests and detain a woman in Austin, Texas, when all she was doing was seeking protection from her abuser. We should be enraged when ICE rounds up homeless men outside a church-based shelter and defends its action by saying that officers were across the street and therefore not in a so-called sensitive location. We should be enraged that ICE goes into an elementary school in Queens, New York, looking for a fourth grader, of all, to allegedly verify enrollment in school in connection with immigration benefits. This is beyond enforcement of our immigration laws. This is unrestrained, arbitrary, capricious, and malicious discretion on the part of ICE to do as they please and to play with the law to justify their actions. The gratuitous cruelty in which the agency is engaging endangers our most basic principles of law and due process. AILA must demand accountability. AILA must expose these kinds of abuses. AILA must uphold the law and protect due process. These are unprecedented times. But this is also the time we must stand vigilant and draw from our nation's long history. This is the time when we know about the dangers of silence in the face of injustice. This is the time for emergency action to protect dignity, respect, and the most basic human rights. When, I ask you, if not now, do we as immigration attorneys, as descendants of immigrants, as citizens of this great country, answer the call to action to protect our democracy, to defend against the attacks on our Constitution and our principles of law and justice, and to preserve the legacy that makes us a free and proud nation of immigrants? As Martin Luther King said, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. We must oppose the administration's pillaging of our justice system, the utter and complete disrespect for the principles of fairness and justice. But above all, we must be the guards against the attacks on our Constitution and the founding principle. The 45th president, in 2 separate budgets now, has tried to amass funds to pay for his deportation force by adding thousands of agents to CBP and ICE, agencies where the officials already feel free to terrorize and sow fear. He has also tried to amass funds for the construction of that famous southern wall, border wall that is going to look just beautiful, which study after study has demonstrated it would be a waste of taxpayers' money and completely ineffective to counter undocumented crossers. In addition, though, he has also asked for detention space to be increased to the tune of 51,000 beds. Now, that is far above and beyond anything we have seen before. So I tell you, We owe this duty to brave immigrants that came before us and helped build this country, to the immigrants who long to be reunited with their families in a seriously backlogged system, to the families being torn apart and the children who live in fear because their parents may be detained and deported. But above all, we owe this duty to our ancestors who immigrated to this country, who believed in what this country stood for and still stands for. Our nation is under attack. And while we still push for advances to update our immigration laws, we now stand to protect what we have. We must not be discouraged. We must not give up. We must stand strong and resist. We must stand strong and resist. So you say and ask yourself, how do we go forward? How do we do this? Well, first of all, we resolve not to yield to the politics of divisiveness. We must continue to stand united and firm. We must also continue to remind our elected leaders of the immense contributions and benefits our nation has received from immigrants. We must educate our opponents that reasonable and fair immigration policy does not mean open borders. It does not mean a nation without borders, but a nation who respects human rights protections, where human dignity is respected, and where the contributions of everyone, native and immigrant alike, are valued. This is our calling. We must stand for the principles upon which our country was founded. We must defend our justice system. We must protect the vulnerable, particularly those caught in immigration court without representation. And we know that there is an enormous representation gap, especially for unaccompanied minors and individuals in detention. We cannot possibly do it alone. We are all soldiers in this war to reclaim our nation's soul. We are the beacons of hope for families divided by outdated quotas. We are the sanctuary for those seeking refuge from persecution. We are the guiding light for innovators, scientists, and entrepreneurs who want to call this country their home. With our justice campaign, in partnership with the American Immigration Council and other allies, we will give lawyers new strategies and cutting-edge tactics to challenge the deportation force, while at the same time recruiting, mentoring, and training non-immigration attorneys to add more soldiers to our army. We cannot fight these battles alone. We cannot win these battles alone, but we can and we will fight these battles together. AILA has also sent a clear and strong message to any jurisdiction or locality that enacts anti-immigrant legislation. Consistent with our mission as an AILA member and an immigrant, I am proud we took a principled stand by withdrawing our next year's annual conference from Texas, which enacted a state which enacted a restrictive and mean-spirited, dangerous law that will foster more profiling and scapegoating of immigrants. By standing strong and moving our next year's conference to San Francisco, a welcoming city, we, as AILA lawyers, will show the world the better face of America. Now, whether it is at a national level working with Congress and speaking truth to this administration, whether we are advocating state by state or city by city to ensure our communities are safe for everyone, regardless of faith, nationality, or country of origin, whether it's through our chapters or that organic effort of coming together and mobilizing at airports and in town halls, AILA has and will always stand with immigrants. The time to stand up for America is now. We have a long road ahead of us, but not one that we haven't traveled before. We know how to defend America's values and what it stands for. I am truly honored to serve this organization this year. And I look forward to working with all of you as we stand together with the Justice Campaign and other efforts to be fearless lawyers in this time of injustice. Together, we will champion the vulnerable. Together, we will defend our Constitution. Together, we are fearless. Together, my colleagues, we are unstoppable. Thank you.